I'd like to start by first apologizing to my family and friends who won't like this video, because I know that from the society I come from, we talk about our strengths and our achievements, but we keep our failures and weaknesses hidden. So please, if you're offended by this video, I'm really sorry about it, but please don't bother getting in touch with me to talk to me about this video, because I'm making this video in full consciousness. I want to talk about my challenges with mental health, not just the difficulties I had with it, but also how impossible it was to get proper health care. I'm doing this to help in my own little way to break the stigma and silence about mental health issues in the African society, at home and in diaspora. I was about 23 years old, sitting at home in my dad's house with some friends, watching television, and nothing unusual really. Suddenly I had this surge come all over me. It was a feeling of numbness, like shivering. My lips ran cold. I was sweating. I felt dizzy. I felt very faint. I thought I was going to pass out and die. And I had this real feeling of fear in me. So I told my friend, you have to take me to the hospital. So this young lady helped me. We got to the doctor, and the doctor looked at me and said, well, you look like you had a shock or something. What happened? I said, no, nothing happened. I was just watching TV. So she tried to calm me down, and after some time I calmed down and I went home, and I felt like that was going to be the end of it. But unfortunately, it was just the beginning. In the next few days, a lot of symptoms were to follow, and I felt that they were all physical. My heart seemed to be racing. I felt like my heart was heavy. I had indigestion. I constantly felt like yawning, and I couldn't let out the yawn. Now that seems like ridiculous, but if you ever feel like yawning and can't let out a yawn, it can really escalate. You start almost getting anxious or feeling irritated. And also I started having this constant lump in my throat, and I couldn't swallow this lump. And I noticed I was very anxious and kind of scared. But I just imagined that I was being scared because of the symptoms I was having, because I felt that something was really terribly wrong with me, that I was really sick. So one day my dad told me we should go and see an ENT doctor. And when we got there, I told him I had this lump in my throat and it just wouldn't go away. I kept swallowing, drinking, trying to get down the lump. I was eating bread, everything, trying to get the lump to go away. I thought something was stuck in my throat. So I actually wanted him to look in my throat and see if something had stuck in my throat. And this doctor started asking me a lot of questions about my work, if I was in a relationship, if I was happy. And after a few questions, I was getting really irritated, and he said, you know, I'm not going to look into your throat because there's nothing there. It's like all in your head, your imagination. And what I needed was a therapy, maybe. So my dad took me to one lady who was a therapist, but then back in Africa, she asked for such a ridiculously huge amount. And at that time, I just felt it wasn't justified paying such money if I'm just imagining things. Perhaps over the period of time, my imagination will all fade away and everything will go back to normal. But the lump in the throat went away after I spoke with the doctor. But other symptoms kept coming on. And the most terrible symptom I had, and which went on for years, was that I had difficulty breathing. I just couldn't get the air in. Sometimes I would stand in the toilet and wedge my two hands on the wall, just trying to breathe in and out, breathe and out. It was such a terrible feeling. And the more I couldn't breathe, the more I was going into panic. And I was so convinced that something was really wrong with me. I was really sick, but that the doctors weren't identifying it properly. And it didn't really occur to me that what I could be having was something to do with my mental frame of mind and not just my physical body. So these symptoms were to continue. I started suffering a lot with my job. I was a lawyer then. I would go to a courtroom and suddenly be so overwhelmed and have to get up and leave the court. I would be somewhere at a function. I would just have to get up and leave. I might be sitting in a room with people having all these horrible symptoms and just feel like leaving. Even on better days, I might be sitting somewhere with people and actually feel like I'm not actually there, like I'm observing everything from far away. And I was having all these nasty physical symptoms also with the breathing. And after some time, of course, my father and my family, they started asking questions. Are you on drugs? What is wrong? And then, of course, as is typical in Africa, the speculation started that, yeah, somebody was trying to do it to me. Somebody was using African voodoo. Somebody didn't want my progress. Somebody was cursing me. All those things were brought up, and it only increased my anxiety and panic. And the other thing that really made matters worse was that my family seemed to feel, and friends, you have to pray, let's pray for you, let's take you to a priest, go for confession, go for prayer. It just made everything worse. Not that I'm against prayer, but here I was thinking I had a physical problem, and I was being told, well, it could also be a problem with witchcraft or enemies. It could also be a punishment from God. It could also be because I wasn't praying. So it was like compounding the problem, and it wasn't really helping me. And eventually one day I visited a family I knew. The man was a doctor. He had studied in Germany and had a German wife. And I opened up to her and was telling her a bit about my symptoms. And she told me that I could be having panic attacks and anxiety. And I'd never really heard of that before. I knew that people could panic and have anxiety, but I didn't know it could be so bad and so extreme that you start having physical symptoms. So that was over 25 years ago, and at that time there was no internet. I went to the local library, but I couldn't find any books on it. So luckily there was a British Council library. So I went there and I read about it, and I read all the material I could find about it there, which also wasn't very easy for me because they were mostly medical books, so, and I wasn't in the medical field, so I couldn't understand quite a lot of it, but at least I was able to make out a picture of what I had. And that moment I realized that, okay, you know, you're not going crazy or whatever. Even if you are, other people have had it too or have it and have to deal with it. So I now knew that this was something people live with. This is something people can deal with. That helped me tremendously. And I started self-medicating on Valium. Luckily for me, I'm not really somebody that likes medication. So I was really taking a very mild dose, and only when I had these attacks. And these attacks continued for about 4 or 5 years. Sometimes I would have longer intervals, maybe a year without an attack. Sometimes it would be like every 1 or 2 months. Until finally, when I came to Germany, I believed that being in a different environment, there are better medical facilities and probably doctors who know more about this. I believed I was like going to be safe here. But unfortunately, I was now being exposed to totally different stress factors over the years, having children, confronting racism, trying so hard to assimilate myself and my children into the society. And I started having these panic attacks again, although this time they were not so extreme. But once after I had a child, I really had such a bad attack. I just had this child and I got home and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep nights on end. And I asked them in the hospital to give me some medication, and they said, no, you are breastfeeding. So I got home and I just felt like I couldn't get any air, I was choking. And my husband took me to the hospital. And it was only when we got to the hospital the third time that night, I told the doctor, look, if you can't help me, please get me someone who can. And the doctor called in a psychosomatic doctor, and she just gave me some tablets, and I slept like almost 2 days through, just getting up to use the toilet. I wasn't even eating, using the toilet, drinking water. And she advised me that I should go and look up some professional help. So I did look up professional help. I got to this psychiatric doctor, and he prescribed me so much medication. I think I could have killed 10 people with that medication he gave me. You take this when you have an extreme case, you take this when you feel normal, so I couldn't start anything with all those medication, because even a small amount of a sedative really kind of knocks me out. And I tried to go for a therapy, but I found out that it actually aggravated my situation, because I couldn't talk to this therapist because I was coming from a totally different background. My reality wasn't her reality. There were things I would tell her, she would think that I should be totally traumatized with those things. But for me, such things seem kind of normal coming from Africa, because we all made such experiences there. So the therapy couldn't help me at all, because we just had two different realities, and it was even more like making it worse. Then another thing that disturbed me with the therapy was, like, you'd go to the therapy, you have this appointment 1 hour. So once the 1 hour is off, she would say, stop. Now, just stop here, and next week when we have our next appointment, we'll pretend there was no break in between and continue from there. Now, that for me was really weird, because, of course, when you're talking about something that is disturbing or hurtful, having to cut off in the middle of that conversation, I couldn't find the link the next week again. So I cut off the therapy. The crazy thing when you have mental challenges is that you can't just take medication like when you have a physical challenge. When you have a mental challenge, you can't just take medication and it goes away like that. Yes, medicine is effective and can help you like as a first aid or when you have a crisis. But the real cure and healing or control comes from you being active, you trying to find out what is wrong with you, why it may be happening to you, and how you can help yourself. So it really took me years, and I had to go on a journey of self to try and find out why could I have been having these attacks? Why was it happening to me? Because it actually dawned on me that that first day I had that panic attack, that wasn't the first day my body had been giving me symptoms or signals that I wasn't coping. But I think it had a lot to do with the kind of environment I lived in or I grew up in, that I wasn't aware of these symptoms, or they just didn't seem to be relevant, because then growing up in Africa, it was all about the outside world, achieving results or failures. So if you did something wrong, you would be punished, and if you did something right, you would be praised. But nobody really spent time to think, what is this child or this young teenager going through emotionally? You might have an accident and you'd get scolded if you were careless, then thank God you are safe. But nobody really sits back to think, is there a trauma that has remained? So I believe that I basically grew up in a society where not much attention was paid to emotional state of mind. And that really affected me. I was also very sensitive as a child, and I also made my mistakes growing up. And I soon realized that people couldn't really relate with it when you start, maybe when you cry, yes, but like once I cried over my dog that died, and people were like, my God, how could she be crying about a dog? So I learned very young to bottle up my emotions, and I think I mastered it so much that I kept keeping everything inside of me. I was so perfect at it that I would sit in the class all through my primary and secondary school, and the other students would be talking about me in a native language, and they didn't even realize I could understand them because I never spoke the language. But I'd sit there with a straight face and never let you know I could understand you or anything. So I became a master of bottling emotions. I joined the race of fighting to achieve results so that you get praised, and try not to be a failure. So I wouldn't say I never learned. I forgot to pay attention to my emotions, those basic emotions every baby comes to the world with. But growing up in a society like that, you kind of kill those feelings, or you kind of put them aside. So you don't cultivate your emotions, and you don't learn to deal with your emotional frame of mind or with your traumas. You just focus on what the world sees out there. What made it really difficult for me to deal with this anxiety and panic attacks is that I didn't have anybody that really understood what I was going through. And I was so ashamed to talk about it, to let people know. I think I didn't really let my friends know about it. I would just suddenly leave and go or something. Maybe they had a slight insight, but they never really knew what I was going through. So I had no one to talk to about it. And the few people I couldn't hide it to, like my family, they just felt, as I've mentioned before, yes, I needed more prayer, or I wasn't spiritual enough, and that just complicated matters. So not having a network is really, really detrimental when you have such conditions. And when I came to Germany too, it did take me some time to build up a network. And then, of course, the same dilemma that here in Germany, many people don't really, many Africans here in the diaspora, they also don't really focus so much on mental health issues. Or maybe I just believe that because I never opened up to anyone. And of course, it took me years, and I didn't even really fully integrate here to like have white friends or so. So I pretty much had to deal with this with my husband and my kids. And the thing with panic attacks is that, and anxiety is that, you don't just need somebody to talk to now and then, but sometimes when you get so scared, you really need somebody to be close to you, to come over and, maybe even hug you or hold your hand. So you need more than just somebody to casually tell the story to when you have a crisis. You really need somebody to be there for you. So apart from my husband and kids, I didn't have anyone. And it was also a bit difficult for my husband because he didn't understand it at all. In fact, one day when we came from the hospital, he was asking me like, do you hear voices? So he couldn't understand it. And I was really, really worried, and I tried as much as possible to hide it away from my kids because I didn't want them to take over this fear from me so that they don't start experiencing the same symptoms like I did. So I didn't have friends I could confide in, or I didn't want to confide in my friends. And I was trying to keep my family, to protect my family from what I was going through. So I didn't speak openly about it. Luckily, when internet came about and a lot of forums and groups online, I was able to join such groups and through the internet gain contact to people who have similar problems and to exchange our ideas and our feelings. And that was a major part of my cure. So please, if you're out there having any kind of mental condition, and there are so many, from panic attacks, anxiety, bipolar, depression, just as the body can be sick, the mind can be sick too and need healing. So if you're out there with any condition, or you even suspect something might be wrong, please seek help, seek professional help. The help may not be adequate, but it's a very good start and can go a long way. Seek help. You need professional care. There's nothing to be ashamed of about going to a psychiatrist or a doctor. Speak to your doctor and seek help. Also, talk to people about it. Talk to people. Go online and try to reach out to strangers and talk to them about what you are feeling and what you are going through. Because you might just spend years suffering and suffering without help because you never reached out for anyone to help you. I've been able to help quite a few women because of what I experienced myself. Sometimes too, I might be having a conversation with a friend, or someone might be writing something in the internet, and I can reach out to her and say, listen, something is not okay. Do you need help? And sometimes the people open up, and so much comes out where you see that they really need help. They need professional help. And I've been able to encourage them, listen, you are not mad. The way everybody thinks, like in Africa, mad means once you have a mental issue, it means you are mad. That means running naked on the street. No, you are not mad. You just need help. The way the body needs help, the mind needs help too. The mind needs to be paid attention to. So reach out to people and talk about what you are going through. And put away the shame and this feeling of being enslaved by the stigma. And to anybody who is so fortunate not to have to deal with mental issues, please put away the stigma. I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to go through what I went through. When you see somebody dealing with mental health issues, be kind. Give the people the courage to seek professional help. Be there for them when they need you. Sometimes they just need somebody to talk to, or someone to even say, I'm here for you. You may not know it, but you may be saving a life. You may really be saving a life. I once reached out to one young lady when I was much younger myself, and I opened up to her what I was going through. Years later, she told me, I was at a point where I was thinking of ending my life, but when you opened up to me and told me what you were going through, I also went to seek help. So please, let's take care of each other, and let's put an end to this stigma and silence surrounding mental illness in the African society.